Mike had been working the night shift at Lakeside Mall for about 6 months. The pay was decent, and the hours fit perfectly with his nocturnal lifestyle. The mall was eerily quiet at night, a stark contrast to the bustling chaos of the daytime crowd. Mike had grown accustomed to the silence, finding a strange comfort in the solitude. But then, the whispers began. At first, Mike thought it was his imagination. The hushed voices seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once, just at the edge of his hearing. He chalked it up to the usual creaks and groans of the old building settling. But as the days turned into weeks, the whispers grew more distinct, more insistent. One night, while making his rounds through the dimly lit corridors, he heard a faint, almost inaudible murmur. "Help us! Help us!" Mike paused, his flashlight beam trembling in his hand. He listened intently, but the whispers faded into silence. Shaking his head, he continued his patrol, determined to ignore the unsettling sounds. Despite his best efforts, the whispers persisted. They followed him, trailing him through the empty hallways and echoing in the deserted food court. Sometimes, they seemed to come from the mannequins in the darkened store windows, their glassy eyes staring blankly at him. "Mike, you need to get more sleep," he muttered to himself one night, trying to shake off the creeping unease. "It's just your mind playing tricks on you." Yet, deep down, Mike knew something was wrong. The whispers were too real, too urgent to be dismissed so easily. But what could he do? Call the cops and tell them he was hearing voices in an empty mall? They'd laugh him out of the station. One particularly quiet night, the whispers grew louder, more desperate. "Please, help us! He's coming! He's coming!" Mike stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding in his chest. This time, the voices were unmistakable. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Maybe it was time to find out where they were coming from. Clutching his flashlight, he followed the whispers through the labyrinthine corridors of the mall. They seemed to guide him, growing louder and more coherent with each step. His journey led him to a part of the mall he rarely visited, the old abandoned basement. The basement door creaked open with a groan, and a rush of stale, musty air greeted Mike. He hesitated for a moment before descending the narrow staircase, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. As he reached the bottom, the whispers crescendoed into a chorus of pleas and cries for help. "Save us! Don't let him take us!" Mike's heart raced as he moved deeper into the basement. The air grew colder, and a faint, metallic smell filled his nostrils. He turned a corner and froze, his blood running cold. There, in the dim light, he saw a row of old, rusty cages. Inside each cage was a woman, their faces pale and gaunt, their eyes wide with terror. Mike's breath caught in his throat as he recognized some of the faces from the missing persons posters that had been plastered around the mall for months. One of the women reached out a trembling hand, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, help us." Mike took a step forward, his mind reeling with disbelief. What is this?" he stammered. Before he could process the scene, a cold, menacing voice echoed through the basement. "I see you've found my little secret, Mike." Mike spun around to see Mr. Jacobs, the mall's owner, standing in the doorway. His usually friendly face was twisted into a sinister grin. "Mr. Jacobs? What are you doing?" Mike asked, his voice trembling. Mr. Jacobs chuckled darkly, stepping closer. "You weren't supposed to find this place, Mike. But now that you have, I'm afraid you won't be leaving." Mike's eyes darted around, looking for a way out. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Mr. Jacobs' grin widened. "Power, Mike. Control. You see, these women are mine. They belong to me. And now, so do you." Desperation fueled Mike's actions. He lunged at Mr. Jacobs, catching him off guard. The two men struggled, their grunts and curses echoing in the confined space. Mike managed to wrestle the keys from Jacobs' pocket and broke free, rushing to unlock the cages. "Hurry, we need to get out of here," Mike urged the women, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the locks. The women, weak but determined, stumbled out of their cages. Just as Mike unlocked the last one, Mr. Jacobs regained his footing and charged at him with a knife. "You think you can take what's mine?" Jacobs roared, slashing wildly. Mike dodged the blade, his adrenaline pumping. He grabbed a nearby pipe and swung it with all his might, connecting with Jacobs' head. The mall owner crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Mike and the women hurried out of the basement, their footsteps echoing through the empty mall. They burst out into the parking lot, the cool night air a welcome relief. Mike quickly dialed 911, his voice shaking as he explained the situation. Within minutes, the police arrived and the nightmare was finally over. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the mall, Mike watched as the women were taken to safety and Mr. Jacobs was arrested. The days following the discovery were a blur of police reports and news coverage. Mike was hailed as a hero, but he didn't feel like one. He couldn't shake the images of the women in the cages or the sound of their desperate whispers. Despite the trauma, Mike found a sense of purpose in helping the women rebuild their lives. He stayed in touch with them, offering support and a listening ear. The mall was closed for a thorough investigation, and Mr. Jacobs faced justice for his horrific crimes. Mike never returned to his job at Lakeside Mall, but he found peace in knowing he had made a difference. The whispers had led him to uncover a dark secret, and in doing so, he had saved lives. As he moved forward, Mike couldn't help but wonder if there were other whispers out there, waiting to be heard. And if there were, he knew he would listen.